Okay, first question, I'm going to start with Dave. Okay? All right. From your perspective, as a male, we have varying ages and sexual orientations. What goes through your mind as you watch a film like Out in Silence, and what resonates with you?
The thing that resonates with me and really touches me is the isolation that CJ experienced. And we hear this so often, and most of you are probably aware of the rash of teenage suicides among gay and lesbian kids here recently. And these kids experienced this isolation. There was a statement in there that he stayed at that house for months, literally, afraid to be out in public. And the self-loathing that goes along with that, the depression. And I really feel, without a mother like he had, that supportive mother, and it brings tears to my eyes, and a few friends like those two girls, the one who said, "I'm happy you came out." I really think he would have been another statistic. His mother said at one point he was suicidal. School boards and teachers, the one statement he made, CJ made, about turning a deaf ear and a blind eye to what was going on right in front of them, and hearing even slurs from the teachers and administration, and the look on that one school board member's face when the gentleman from Washington made the comments just makes my blood boil. You can imagine. That film really touches me, and if it wasn't for people, and I don't know if he's here today, he was last night, people like Michael Wheatley, who work with the youth in this community and build self-esteem and teaching self-acceptance and being who you are. To me, that's the key to preventing the suicides, the depression, the drug use, the alcohol use, the prostitution, and on and on and on and on.
I guess we'll figure it out, I guess. So watching a film like this brings me back to my school days. I was actually a youth participant in 1 in 10 back in the day. And I really found that as a source of strength, and to be able to connect with other people who identified the way I did. I went to a Catholic high school and a Catholic grade school in the Phoenix area. And needless to say, the gay thing was not, was not something that was a positive in that kind of environment. I received lots of bullying and name-calling, and not a lot of intervention from teachers. And unfortunately, that's a pattern that continues to the present day. Working with educators in schools, we often come across people who are in education, who are in leadership roles in education, who say, "There are no gay kids on my campus. Those things don't happen. There are no gay kids here." And I wonder sometimes if they actually look at the kids and talk to the kids and get to know them, or if they're simply looking at statistics, because I would believe that it's hard-pressed to walk on any school campus or practically anywhere and not find a gay person, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender person. And we have statistics to back up the fact that kids are being bullied and tormented in school. The GLSEN performs a national school climate survey every 2 years, and it's basically a survey of LGBT youth in schools. And of those youth, about 85% report hearing abusive remarks, physical abuse, cyberbullying. They report hearing that somebody is harassing them in some way while on school, 85%. Another 75% say that they hear the word gay or the word fag or the word dyke used, well, obviously negatively toward them. And so that's a big campaign push that we're pushing on with GLSEN, is that it's called Think Before You Speak. We want to make sure that kids understand that by associating the word gay with something that's negative actually does a lot of harm, and unintended harm. And teaching people those small steps and how to identify their stereotypings and how to recognize that we're all coming from a world where we view others that are different from us with apprehension and anxiety, and teaching people to learn to accept other people and meet, as the film said, to meet each other halfway so that we can learn and open up that dialogue. I think that's going to be helpful moving on in the future.
Yes, it does. All right. As an ex-high school student, I was bullied, received death threats, followed home on the bus by vehicles, had things thrown at me, pushed around, depantsed. So it's very nice to see that people in the film were in a small town taking action, such as myself.
The definition of bullying is a person is bullied when he or she is exposed repeatedly over time to negative actions on the part of one or more other persons, and she or he has difficulty defending him or herself. This includes aggressive behavior that involves unwanted negative actions, a pattern of behavior that is repeated over time, and an imbalance of power or strength. And we've touched a little bit on my experience, perhaps as a victim, but I'm curious, have you ever been a bully? Have you ever been a bystander? Because we're all affected by bullying. It's not just the victim. 86% of us are going to change our behavior to make sure that we are not targeted. Have you ever had to do that?
Though I'm a straight ally, I'm also a lot of other things, and I was bullied. I was harassed, made fun of, threatened. I'm an immigrant. I was born in London, England, and I'm the child of Jewish parents. And growing up, I found that being Jewish in the 1950s in rural Kansas was not something you wanted to be out with. I was denied access, well, my parents were denied access to housing. Jewish people and black people weren't allowed to live in certain neighborhoods. I wasn't invited to pledge parties when I went to college. But I also looked a little different. I had a kind of a small head, big ears, and I was constantly being teased. I was also a DNF student in high school. And a lot of it I attribute to the bullying and the harassment. And it wasn't until I started my undergraduate degree that I started to flourish academically, and by the time I was in my master's program, I was on the dean's list. So bullying has a definite effect on a student's ability to carry on their academic pursuits. It really saddens me when I hear comments, slurs, whether it's sexual orientation or gender identity. And today I confront those things.
I guess I've always felt like we sometimes play the target, or not play, but sometimes we are put in the position of being the target, and other times we are the bully, because power, it changes hands a lot. Sometimes we have the opportunity to really make an impact, and that impact can sometimes be negative, and in that regard, we have the ability to be the bully. But I think a source of strength is to identify when those times are, and recognize when we do have the position of power or privilege in any given situation, and remember to use that as a positive. So part of learning to identify that and identify your role in the specific scenario that you're in is important. Have I been the victim or the target of bullying and harassment? Absolutely, and not just for being gay. In fact, I was very closeted up until a few years ago, because I was very afraid of what would happen to me if people found out who I was. And so I was always picked on for a million other things that kids get picked on for. But have I done picking on and been the bully? Absolutely. I was hurting inside. And when you're struggling inside to find something of meaning, oftentimes you lash out and hurt other people. So I believe that in the situation of a bully and a victim or a target, I think that both are being hurt. Both are actually the victims, although in that situation, one is a bully and one is a target. I believe both are actually being hurt at that time.
Well, sadly, not only have I been a victim, but I also used to be a bully in 6th grade before I came out. I struggled with my sexual orientation and actually made fun of my best friend now, who was the 6th grade gay guy. So it's really sad to believe that I was.
You've seen both roles. Jimmie said something very interesting, because when we do study bullying, we tend to study this. It happens in the workplace as well, but we tend to study this through K-12 education. And every campus is different, and every learning environment is different. So you may be top dog on one campus and move to a different school and find yourself on the bottom rung. So we can't really identify the characteristics that makes one targeted. It varies from site to site and within each unique culture. The last question I have, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience, and hopefully you have some burning questions yourselves. What do you personally do when you witness an act of social cruelty? When you hear a slur, you witness prejudice? What do you do to prevent it? How active are you?
Well, the first time that I actively spoke out against a slur was in a workplace situation where one of my coworkers said, "All gays should be killed." And I said, "You know, I find that offensive." I said, "How do you know that I don't have a gay child or a lesbian daughter or a transgender sibling or, you know, my father or grandfather?" And the person was really taken back by it. I was working in a hardware store at that time, kind of a redneck environment. And yeah, now I speak out openly. One of the things PFLAG stresses is that people should be out. The only time you shouldn't be out is if it isn't safe. And this usually applies to younger people whose parents might take away their financial support, possibly their home. There are a lot of homeless gay kids. But otherwise, be out. And I always mention this. You all know Kristen Cinema. She's wonderful. And I've worked with Kristen on a number of different panels. But we see 180 degrees from one another on this whole thing about being out. And I really feel it's important that the gay and lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community have a face to the rest of the population. I don't think that you should be closeted and hide no matter what the consequences. I wrote an article for Echo magazine where I said, I rather lose and have my integrity than win and not. So we don't see eye to eye on that issue, but I think that when the community has a face and those stereotypes are broken down, the slurs and the other things go away because they realize everybody is just like everybody else. No more than my heterosexual sexual behavior identifies me, nor should a homosexual person sexual behavior identify them. There's so many more aspects to personality and who we are.
Though I remember clearly the first time I stood up against someone else who was saying it was a racial slur, and I had no idea what I needed to say in that situation. So, so all I did was, you know, I heard it and I felt this fury just built up in me, and I went, "Ah!" And it just stopped the whole conversation. And then once I had like a second or two to collect my thoughts, you know, I told them that kind of language, and I'm not going to be around people who speak that way about others. But just shutting down the conversation seemed to be the right thing to do at that time, because hate speech has a way of it's like a snowball. It starts small, and it might start as just a joke or a phrase in passing, but all of a sudden that comfort zone of hatred or that comfort zone of prejudice starts to grow, and people start feeling more comfortable coming out and saying other things. And if you shut it down immediately, it derails the whole building of the comfort zone. So yeah, that was the first time, and to this day, when I do safe space trainings, I tell educators, address harassment or address bullying immediately. Don't, if it's safe, of course. If you're not gonna make matters worse for the target, address it immediately. Because as soon as you step in and show that person, the perpetrator, the bully, and those bystanders that that kind of behavior is not gonna be tolerated, you've then turned that instance into a teachable moment that many, many people can learn from. And it helps to just shut it down and not ever allow that safe zone for oppression and hatred to ever appear.
Well, it kind of depends on the situation. If it comes to somebody being pushed around or a teacher saying something like gays need to go to hell, which has happened, or there's somebody in a class that's suicidal, I usually make sure that I walk that student down to admin directly and make sure it gets taken care of on spot. But sometimes if they don't intervene, that's when a phone call goes to the Board of Education.
Straight to the top.
Yeah, it's fun.
Also, off of what Jimmie said, when we don't confront this, we're telling everybody else in the room it's okay. And the message is even louder and stronger. When you're a teacher, that message is just very clear to every student. Must be cool, must be right. If someone doesn't confront it, it's almost worse than the action itself. So we work a lot with teachers on that. It's a very powerful position in the classroom. We have time for some questions. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask of the panelists? I think they're going to give you a microphone, and they're coming right behind you.
I'm a newly retired high school principal and an assistant principal for many years. I have mandated in the past 5 or 6 years at faculty training that all faculty go through at least 2 full days of training, especially on the gay-lesbian anti-discrimination. It is totally unacceptable, and I think it starts with the principal on down. If the principal is with you, if you don't have a principal that's going to follow through, there's a problem there. And I've come out, I'm a gay man with a partner, and my entire staff knows. I have not broadcasted to the entire student body, but my staff knows, and I think I've changed a lot of minds on gay lesbians. They say, oh, we never knew you were gay. Well, yeah, I'm your boss, and it doesn't matter. And I think by a gay person coming out and showing to others who you really are takes away a lot of the discrimination. However, it's rough. I was a principal in an all-African-American school in Chicago, and the gay bullying there was very, very rough. And it was African-American students bullying other African-American students who were gay. And what I would do is I'd call the bully into my office and I'd say, how would you like to be on a public bus where someone used racial slurs? Oh, we wouldn't like it. But their whole thing was, well, we're black and they're black, it doesn't matter. I said, we're not talking a racial situation here. We're talking human dignity. And this particular individual may be gay or lesbian, and they have the same rights as you do as an African American not to be discriminated against. So I think it comes from the administration all the way down. And if I had a teacher that said, go to hell or something like that, I mean, they were in my office. There's no way I'd put up with that, you know? So that's just a comment. It's really not a question.
Yes. And you know, to a quick response to that, we definitely encourage administrators to contact us for any training needs. If you're a teacher and you want, training for your staff or for your students, we're happy to provide it. But let's also remember that there are a lot of principals out there who aren't as open-minded or as members of diverse communities. And we have to remember that when we're confronted with those kinds of barriers, there are other ways to go. As Caleb said, a call to the Board of Education is great. I mean, they're accountable to the people. And let's not forget school boards. I serve on a school board. School boards are an elected body. And if you can make change at the most local level here in Arizona, school board is where to do it. And I would welcome anybody who wants to open up a conversation about creating policy change on a school district level, because that is really going to hit home with anti-gay bullying and harassment.
Yeah, I want to say something. I want to thank Caleb because he not only stood up for himself against the school board, but this young man has also put every other school board in Arizona on notice that they can be sued, and he got their attention. And I endorse that kind of action when it's going to hit them in the pocketbook, when it's going to push them where they're not politically willed to go. That's the way it gets done. And this young man has done more than anybody else in the state by simply taking that action. Thank you, Caleb.
I just wanted to mention, during the film, there was a mention of the doll case in Titusville, Pennsylvania. That set a precedent nationwide. That gentleman was awarded $312,000 in that suit against that school board. And when when CJ mentioned, oh, it was that little ACLU thing he got that money from, I imagine he got a similar settlement. So he probably could have afforded a Maserati or a Ferrari at that point. But his mother probably is holding the purse strings. I just wanted to say one other thing. PFLAG has what's called the Safe Schools Committee, and I was involved with the Chandler School District, and we should never take for granted that principals and teachers have the support of their school boards. There's such a threat there. The GSAs, the Gay Straight Alliances that GLSEN sets up, they have to have a sponsor just like any other club. And a woman who was, I believe, a counselor, or no, a teacher, offered to be the sponsor for the GSA there in the Chandler High School. She was removed and put into a junior high school. There's a lot of fear amongst teachers and counselors being sponsors for GSAs because of the consequences, the backlash they might receive. So never take it for granted that teachers have the support of their administrations.
Yeah, I just want, you've been speaking a lot about schools and school boards. For policymakers, what about legislative measures? Things that can really happen on either a citywide level or on a statewide level. I don't know who can speak about that.
Well, there's ARS code 15341-40 that you need to refer to if you are ever dealing in a situation with your child or a family member, or somebody comes to you and says what happens, because we do have school law for this. And there are 7 steps that the schools must take. That legislation is being reviewed as we speak. But I can give you the 7 steps very quickly, but when students and parents must have a confidential way to report this to schools, some way or another. Step 2, parents may report this instead of asking their child to do so. And the administration has 24 hours by law to investigate this. All staff must be trained to report bullying and incidents of bullying. Documentation is crucial. If you are a teacher or you are a parent or you are working with youth, document everything from the beginning. If this happens by cyber, which this is a growing trend, never respond to it, always save it. You need to get kids not in private space with their technology and monitor this. Once this has been reported and they are looking into it, admin must conduct the formal investigation. They must call all parties in and investigate. All documentation must be in place. There must be discipline provided, but there is also, and there must be some specialists involved. We need to look at the prevention most of all. There is also discipline for a false report though as well. So there is ARS code for us.
And no, it doesn't. Right. Let's face the fact. We live in Arizona, so all right. I mean, we're not going to get a lot of comprehensive, left-leaning, full-on reform on gay rights or safe space for LGBT students in Arizona. Not yet, because the groundwork has to be done. So the groundwork gets done on, I believe anyway, the groundwork needs to be done on the local level, the school boards. Because the school boards have by law, they have the power to set policy for their school district. We've seen some really good school district policies come out in Arizona. Kyrene School District, for example, just adopted a policy that enumerates LGBT youth, faculty, staff, and community members who happen to be on campus. I mean, it is pretty encompassing of a policy. So those are, and in addition to that, GLSEN is now offering them professional development for all of their staff on how to implement that policy. That is true, like on the ground reform that's going to get done like immediately. At the same time, we can work on state reform, and we can work on the other levels of government. But I think we have two real big aces in the hole. First of all, we can make change on school boards, and oftentimes on a school board, you have 3, 5, or 7 member school boards. I mean, there's not a lot of votes away from actual reform on a school board. And compared to the legislature, you're talking 90 different people plus the governor, who we know is very gay friendly. So I think if we start where we take smaller bites, right? On the other side of the coin, we have the federal government. And the federal government has put out a statement that they are going to be in full support of lawsuits and litigation against school districts based on discrimination, harassment, or violence toward LGBTQ students. So the federal government on one side is backing us up to do the groundwork to build the foundation in order to make state reform.
All of the legal safeguards describing applicable to private schools specifically.
No, unfortunately, they're not. That they are private, that they're not funded by the state or the federal government. It's when a school is funded by a municipality, a state, or the federal government, then these laws go into effect. But private schools, like a Catholic school, that none of the funding comes from the state or the federal government, they do not have to abide by them.
However, the point could be raised that because Arizona has an open schools policy that you can basically kind of take your kid anywhere, and we have these vouchers, that their funding follows the student. I know on the school board, every year we vote on, I don't know, maybe about $20,000, $30,000 that goes to a local private school because they receive a chunk of our federal funding for having our students in their school, essentially. So the argument could be raised that they are receiving federal funding from the federal government through Title I and all these other entitlements, and they would be applicable to Title IX of the Civil Rights Code. That's an argument that a lawyer would have to make for you. I'm just raising the question. But I've identified that as kind of maybe a back way in, but it's going to have to be done through litigation. There's just no way to legislate that.
My name is Keith Menio. I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been working with bigoted groups for about 20 years. And one thing I find that they are a master at is passive violence with the intent of aggression. They know just how to word their language to incite the other person that they're being discriminated against in such a way where they try to manipulate the person into anger. And once that happens, the person that's discriminated against, that's trying to fight for change, becomes not only the target but less effective. My question to the panel: what advice could you give to us as agents of change to be able to deal with these people so that we could make sure that the anger that some of us have inside dealing with these people could keep in check so that we continue to be effective, just as that guy did when he was dealing with the bigoted religious person. He was a master. He kept his cool throughout the whole thing. That's absolutely essential. What advice can you give us in order to keep that at bay?
There are probably people in the audience, or maybe you, who know more about this than I do, but there's a program out called bully proofing, and it is teaching people who are bullied not to react so that it reinforces the bully's behavior. It's called bully proofing. I wish I knew more about it, but I would Google it and see what comes up.
I'm going to take a crack at that one. I differentiate people between friends and allies, right, of the LGBT community. To be a friend of the LGBT community, you can be a member of the LGBT community or a straight friend and have, all the love and compassion in the world for your gay friends, right? And you like them, and you go shopping with them, and you go out with them, and things are great. And when it really hits the fan, you want to respond and you want to help, but your emotions and your anger and your frustration might get in the way. That's a good friend. I'd like to have people be allies. And the difference is, being an ally means that you're investing the time and energy, and sometimes a little bit of resources, that it takes to train yourself on how to respond to these kinds of things, to learn statistics, to learn how to have a conversation with somebody on a religious grounds or on a civil rights grounds in order to be an ally of the LGBT community. We do this all the time with educators. Oh yeah, I have gay friends. My hairstylist is gay. I like gay people. That's fine. Well, that's great. We're glad that you like gay people. That's cool. But we want to move you into what can you do if you hear somebody making a derogatory statement about a gay kid? Like, how do you address that and give you that skill set so now you can be an ally and a friend? That makes sense? So advice that I would give to everybody out there is if you truly are have a desire to be an ally, whether it's the LGBT community, the African American community, the immigrant community, whatever community it is that draws you closest, become an ally by educating yourself, by getting involved in reputable organizations who have, might have some resources to offer you, some training to offer you. Just immerse yourself in the information and immerse yourself on the technique it takes to respond to these really hostile people, because that's going to truly make you a powerful force and a powerful ally in our movement so that we can promote the gay agenda, right?
One more question.
Yes, my name is Margot Schaefer. I'm an advocate for the TG, TS, and IS communities. And one of the things I wanted to ask you all to address is the dirty secret of our community, and that is GLBT on GLBT bullying that takes place within our own community. And how do we constructively call that out and make other activists in our community who marginalize the smaller voices, within our movement, because a house divided is a house that can't stand.
I think you just modeled for us exactly what we have to do. We have to interrupt the discussion. We have to continually add to this discussion, and most importantly, we've got to be allies for each other. We can't stop educating one another. It's our #1 tool. It's the only way we're going to beat this.
Yeah, this is a huge issue. I sometimes say that working with the LGBTQ and all the other acronyms is like herding cats, because everybody's got their own agenda, and there is a lot of backbiting within the community. As a matter of fact, just recently I was down in Casa Grande at a PFLAG meeting, and I'm embarrassed to say that, when somebody referred to a transgender person as it, and I interrupted that individual and said that's totally inappropriate at a PFLAG meeting. Everybody deserves respect, and I don't want to hear it again. And yeah, I've heard bisexual people called fence sitters in a very derogatory way. So yeah, there's a lot of backbiting, and it has to be confronted just the same way as any slur against anybody. I just want to mention too, if any of you are interested in what was just said about being a straight ally, go to pflag.org and you can read this brochure online. It's called Guide to Being a Straight Ally. And I'll give this to you so you can promote it.
Absolutely. There's, how am I going to put this? There's different generations of LGBT people in our community, right? Obviously. And I do see a lot of division between the different letters of the alphabet within my age group and older. But the hope that I have and the hope that I see, because I do work with LGBT youth, I coach a softball team, in case any of you are wondering. If you want to come support us, we're having a fundraiser at Cherry Bar on Super Bowl Sunday. Come on down. Support the gay and lesbian youth softball team. The gay youth don't subscribe to this acronym that we throw out, LGBT. They don't really identify as LGBT. Many of them adopt, pansexual or queer or some other identifier so that they can signify. It's almost as a way they're signifying that kind of out with the old, in with the new kind of thing. And to see the kids interact with each other, they don't typically have reservations against transgendered people, against gay versus lesbian, or the bisexual fence sitter kind of thing. You don't typically see that. What you see is acceptance based on the individual, regardless of any other factor. And so that's a really big source of hope for me, for our community. And seeing that every week that I work with these youth, seeing how strong they are as one community. And I hope that that stays as they grow, mature, and that they don't succumb to this divisive, you know, I'm gay and then you're lesbian and you do your thing and I do my thing. I hope that they continue to move forward as one community. And I think one way we can ensure that as our generation is to be those constructive role models. Get involved with youth. I mean, any way you can. If you don't have time to volunteer with an organization, that's fine. But do anything you can to touch the lives of an LGBT youth, because they are really going through a lot, you know?
We're running out of time, and we'd like to continue this conversation, and we will take the conversation outside if you have any questions specifically for any of us. Something I'd like to remind us all, it's not just gay kids that are bullied. Our special needs kids, kids that have immigrant status or are questioned, and race and ethnicity still plays a part. So when we look at bullying, I hope we look at it inclusively as well. Something I would like to remind us, though, this morning, because there is one way we can beat bullying. It's real easy, it's real cheap, it doesn't take much, and it is to be an ally. The research proves it. So this morning, we will be reminded of an ally's promise abridged by Anthony D'Angelo. I believe success is the freedom to be yourself. I believe no one is wrong. They are only different. And I believe your circumstances do not define you. Rather, they reveal you. I believe without a sense of a caring community, there can be no community. And I believe our minds are like parachutes. They only work if they are open. And I believe we only live once. But if we live it right, one time is all we'll need. And I believe we must first get along with ourselves before we can get along with others. I challenge you this morning and every day from here on out to honor who you are. I challenge you to enjoy your life rather than endure it. I challenge you to create the status quo rather than accept it. And I challenge you to live in your imagination rather than your memory. And I challenge you, we challenge you, to live your life as a revolution and not a process of evolution. And we all most definitely challenge you to ignore other people's ignorance so that you may discover your own wisdom. Thank you for being here with us this morning and studying this issue.